and welcome to the program. I'm Shola Shuyeli. The National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speech Bill was one of several bills introduced on the floor of the Senate on Tuesday, the 12th of November. It's also the second bill introduced by the lawmakers to regulate social media, the first being the Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019. In this report, we have the highlights of the Senate sitting and some early reactions.
Petitions.
Within 1 week, the Senate has introduced two bills to regulate the social media space.
Of November.
The Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019 and a bill to establish a National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speeches. The bill to establish a National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speeches is listed on Tuesday's order paper for first reading. Some of the highlights of the bill include: the objective and purpose for which the Commission is established is to facilitate and promote a harmonious, peaceful coexistence within the people of all ethnic groups, and more importantly, to achieve this objective by ensuring the elimination of all forms of hate speeches in Nigeria, and to advise the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on all aspects thereof. Any person who commits an offence under this section shall be liable to life imprisonment, and where the act causes any loss of life, the person shall be punished with death by hanging. Reactions have been pouring in over the introduction of these bills. A coalition of civil society organizations visits the Senate Minority Leader to express their displeasure over the introduction of the Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019, also known as the Social Media Bill.
Social media is now seen as the last impediment to an emerging fascist and totalitarian state in Nigeria. We therefore most respectfully and reverently urge your leadership to side with Nigerians and impress it on your colleagues not to support this obnoxious bill that seeks to attack the last hold of the common man.
Regarding this bill, we cannot make any comment on what is still on the first stage of the bill. But what I can assure you, and I can assure Nigerians, is that this Senate cannot be a party to removing the rights of Nigerians to whatever is enshrined in the Constitution. The Constitution says under Section 39, as you rightly have noted in your address, that we have rights. We have those freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom to hold and espouse ideas. Those things are fundamental freedoms of every human being that is guaranteed by all our members. And I can assure you that the 9th Senate will not abridge your rights. That we will not, as part of the 9th Senate, accept. I do not think that Nigerians who fought and some paid the supreme price to bring us to the point where we are and have a democratic government will willy-nilly give it away and make us to go back to the dark days of repression and suppression of our rights.
Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, in an interview with Channels Television, says the Senate should focus on enacting legislations to better the lives of Nigerians rather than seeking to stifle free speech.
Using taxpayers' money to waste or siphon public taxpayers' money in the name of trying to say you want to set up a commission that will just unnecessarily consume public resources, when we are talking about reducing the cost of governance.
Both bills will now have to pass through the legislative process, part of which will include getting the views of Nigerians during the public hearings.
Now, Senator Mohammed Sani Musa, who sponsored the Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019, has been speaking about the need to regulate the use of social media. That bill, among other things, seeks to punish abuse of social media with a 3-year jail term or a 150,000 naira option of fine, or both.
The xenophobic attacks that you're seeing, what triggered it much? The social media. Misinformation. Ours is the negative part of that information that we want to see that there is a law that guided it. So we need legislations that will guide that. And part of it is that we said, you as an individual that have your phone and you can just go into your room and test, and just draft something that you know is false and you send it out. And you that have the platform as a group that will read that and you know very well that this is not true, and you decide to disseminate it too. And also you that operate as the transmitter, you also have a responsibility. And that is the reason why we felt we must come up with a legislation that this is personal legislation. And I felt we need it in this country. If countries like Belarus, countries like Philippines, Singapore, Italy, Malaysia, Australia, France, Indonesia, Oman, Egypt here are putting legislation to control the spread of false information, what stops us from doing it? It's a proposal. And the proposal I made out of it is that if anybody is caught with this kind of situation, you cop out between 150,000 naira to a maximum imprisonment of 3 years, or both. And if it is a corporate organization that refused to block that false information, despite the fact that they've been alerted by the authorities not to disseminate that information for public interest, and they still go ahead to do it, refusing to do that blockage, will be penalized between 5 million to 10 million for those organizations. And you will see that it will be deterrent to others. And there will be a kind of, no matter what you think, when you go back to your room trying to put those things, you will have a second thought that the law can cut up with you.
Ahead of the public hearing on both bills, there has been growing opposition to the attempts to stifle free expression, and particularly the death penalty proposal for hate speech. Law Weekly has the views of some senior lawyers.
With profound respect to the Senate, I am convinced beyond any shadow of doubt that the members have not familiarized themselves with the relevant provisions of the Penal Code, the Criminal Code, and the Cyber Crimes Act on hate speech. The Cyber Crime Act of 2015, particularly sections 24 and 26, have very draconian provisions. Already, the Buhari administration is using the provisions of the law to deal with journalists instead of dragging Nigeria through the mud and exposing Nigeria to international odium by prescribing the death penalty for alleged hate speech. Our legislators should be advised to stop further debates on that primitive piece of legislation. If it is passed through any error or omission, we are going to challenge it. Such a law cannot stand in the light of sections 39, of the Constitution and Article 9 of the African Charter, similar laws have been declared illegal in the ECOWAS Court of Justice and in the African Court on Human Rights. In other words, if the law is passed, we are going to challenge it before our municipal courts or outside the country. But we are not going to allow the Senate to abrogate the rights that we have fought for and won.
First, I have a difficulty in knowing what hate speech is. If I say, for example, that you do not really appreciate or you know the jobs, you don't know the demands of the job you are doing, that is a hate speech. Because you want to be commended for what we are doing. But what injury has that occasioned to you or to the society? So apart from the difficulty in knowing what hate speech is, I believe that the law of defamation in our books is more than sufficient to cater for these situations. And you can sue anybody over and over again. If there is an infraction of your right, you have the law of information to fall back on. And you can claim damages for whatever injury that has been done to your reputation. So that gives me the problem to know whether we need a new law, that we have the kind of heavy punishment that we are proposing, particularly in a constitutional democracy. Because the court will need, if that law eventually passes through, there will be a duty on the part of the court to determine the limit and the scope of that law in view of the provisions of the Constitution.
The bill at National Assembly, I know that is ill-advised, and I believe that that bill will not reach a stage of passage. When there is public hearing, members of the public, NGOs will come and make their contribution, which I believe the senators and members of the House of Reps will remove the wheat from the chaff. But I must also tell you that there is no law or there is no right that doesn't have responsibility or limits. Social media in Nigeria, the way as it is, if we leave it as it is uncontrolled, it can lead to the next civil war. Because a lot of fake news that have caused a lot of confusion, a lot of dispute are on the rise. So there must be restriction, but the restriction is not by jailing people or by putting fines. There are ways that freedom can be, can be put in a way that it will not be abused. But the way as it is, the law needs to do some panel beating.
Certainly, prescribing the death penalty for any offense must not be taken very lightly. In most jurisdictions of the world, they have done away with the death penalty, even for murder or for killing, and then for hate speech. We're now introducing the death penalty when there's a strong advocacy that it should even be removed for normal offenses. Then that's it's worrisome, I must say. Although, like I said, without much thoughts or close attention to what has been done. But that aspect of it is worrisome, and I think it needs to be looked at very, very closely.